What's the most bizarre or interesting fact you know that sounds fake, but is actually true? Some blind people can see. The eyes work but the brain can't interpret the info. One day on Venus is longer than 1 year on Venus. The city of Paris took the rats to court in the Middle Ages for causing the plague, and thanks to a brilliant public defense attorney, the rats won the case. There are, unfortunately, no recorded cases of pirates forcing people to walk the plank. The star Betelgeuse formed well after the dinosaurs went extinct. You are 10 times more likely to get bit by a New Yorker than a shark. Ponderosa pine bark smells like ice cream. Mostly vanilla, sometimes strawberry, and seldom chocolate. We used to go around the woods back home, smelling trees, and yelling what flavors we found. Narcolepsy is often mistaken for insomnia or depression. In 1886, after Kenneth Mackenzie died, William Wynne Westcott acquired a collection of documents from Mackenzie's widow, including a particular set of folios written in code, now known as the cipher manuscripts. He and his colleague S. L. McGregor Mathers deciphered the documents and found that they were instructions/outlines for several magical and initiatory rites and rituals. Using these instructions, Westcott, Mathers, and a third colleague named William Robert Woodman founded the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Among the Golden Dawn's members were some of the most influential artists of the early 20th century, including actress Florence Farr, A.E. Waite, who is famous for creating the most well-known design of tarot cards, and poet W.B. Yeats. But another more infamous man would soon be initiated into the order, Aleister Crowley. The Golden Dawn only lasted a few years as it fell victim to schisms within the order, and soon the Golden Dawn ceased to exist. However, Aleister Crowley would go on to become the head of another magical society, Ordo Templi Orientis. Among the members of OTO was a NASA rocket scientist named Jack Parsons. Now, Parsons would eventually become associated with another, not yet, but soon to be, influential man, and the two set out to perform an extreme magical rite known as the Babylon working. The men intended to impregnate Parsons's wife with a baby who would be the physical incarnation of the goddess Babylon, also referred to as a moon child. When Parsons wrote a letter to Crowley explaining their intention of performing the Babylon working, Crowley was so disturbed by the news that he immediately had Parsons expelled from the OTO. But Parsons and his colleague went on with the rite anyway. The colleague then stole a large sum of money from Parsons and never contacted him again. This colleague's name was L. Ron Hubbard, and he would go on to found Scientology. The highest peak of Mount Everest was first measured at exactly 29,000 feet but was instead reported as 29,002 feet to avoid the impression of an estimate. When the Great Pyramids of Egypt were being built, there were still woolly mammoths walking around. Stonehenge and the Great Pyramids were built at roughly the same time. And the pyramids look like shit compared to what they used to look like. Originally it was all smooth sides and white limestone. We only have the blocky core left now. There have been more prime ministers of Israel born in Belarus than there have been prime ministers of Belarus. I once had a housemate who was born in the 1700s, and I am not quite 50 years old yet. It's true. When I was a baby, my great-grandfather briefly lived with us. I'm my family's genealogist. I learned from a census record in England that my great-grandfather had lived in the same house as his great-grandfather, who was born in 1797. When the Aztec Empire was founded, Oxford University in England was already 300 years old. On March 3, 1983, former NFL quarterback Terry Bradshaw checked into a hospital, and used an alias to disguise himself. The fake name he used was Tom Brady. There is a disease called Kuru that was spread by cannibals eating the brains of those who died of Kuru. Mary Shelley, author of Frankenstein, was the daughter of feminist writer Mary Wollstonecraft, who died in childbirth with Shelley. Years later, Shelley lost her virginity on top of her mother's grave. When Mary was starting to see poet Percy Bysshe Shelley, who was married, and Mary only 16, she declared her love for him at her mother's grave, and they consecrated the relationship there. From then on, the day was referred to as Percy's birthday. If you line up all of the planets in our solar system end to end, they would be able to fit in the space between the Earth and the Moon with enough space left over to include Pluto. Jack Black's mother worked for NASA and created the technology that saved the Apollo 13 astronauts. John Tyler, the 10th President of the United States, was born in 1790. He has a living grandson. 3 generations cover almost the entirety of US history. There was a time in 18th century England that playing the bagpipes was punishable by death. At the rate humans shed skin, it basically means we are the ship of Theseus. The Portuguese man of war is made up of 3 distinct animals. The brain named itself. Sharks are older than trees, by about 50 to 100 million years. Birds are considered feathered, avian, dinosaurs. Electrons don't exactly exist as a particle. Rather, there are fields of probability where the existence of an electron is higher. Nintendo has been in operation since 1899. Your skin doesn't have a specific sense organ to let you know if it's wet or not. Apples at the grocery store can be up to a year old. Blindness isn't all about darkness. Blindness is actually a spectrum with varying visual effects. Some people have no left or right peripheral vision, some see splotches of black in their visual fields, some have blurred lines of sight, others have cone vision. Imagine looking through a traffic cone or ice cream cone, among lots of other visual differences. Only about 10 to 15% of blind people see nothing but darkness. Hollywood's misconceptions have the general public so skewed when they see a person using a white cane or guide dog in public, thinking they cannot see at all. Most of us have varying degrees of sight and visual fields and can do some things independently or with the help of a white cane, guide dog, sighted guide, or glasses. Source: legally blind female who utilizes a guide dog and a white cane who is as independent as possible in navigating adulthood and all it entails. The Jonestown mass suicide victims didn't drink the Kool-Aid, as the expression goes, it was Flavor Aid. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/flavor_aid. The Vikings of Norway were apparently so good at bow hunting elk while skiing that the practice was outlawed as a conservation attempt. Also, Viking women had a fair amount of legal power for the time period. They could divorce their husbands for things like cheating, abuse, or wearing clothing that was too feminine. I'm a historical fiction author, so I've got dozens of more facts if y'all are interested. Mike the headless chicken survived for 18 months with its head cut off. The owners took it on tour and fed it by dropping food and water directly into its esophagus. Wombat poop is cube-shaped. In nearly every professional baseball field, home plate is west of the pitcher's mound. The color orange is named after the fruit. Women weren't allowed to establish credit in their own name until 1974. Ancient sailors were always talking about sea monsters, usually ones with tentacles. The most likely explanation for these tentacled sea monsters is whale dicks. Some species of whales have males gather around a female and take turns with her. The waiting males often drift around upside down just under the surface. The only part of them sticking out of the water is a penis that's several meters long and looks like a pink tentacle.